3, 2, 1, go.
You're listening to The Kyle Chambers Show.
And welcome. My name is Kyle Chambers. I'm here today with Shiona Thompson. Shiona is a news anchor at 900 CHML in Hamilton, and she has been doing it for over 28 years. Thank you for joining the show today.
Well, thanks, Kyle. Pleasure to be here.
What inspired you to get into radio broadcasting and the news aspect?
Well, actually, my parents were both radio junkies as I was growing up. And so I was always exposed to radio, to news. They were very up on current affairs. My mother was American, my father Canadian. And so they would talk about all sorts of issues, political, really anything that was going on in the world. They were very active and informed. And so you just sort of pick some of that up by osmosis. And it's constantly fascinating because it's always changing. And then when I was about 16 in high school, my choir took a trip through England. And so we were interviewed by BBC Leeds. And that was my first appearance on a radio program ever. And it was endlessly fascinating. So I decided that maybe this would be a good thing for me to do. And I'm very mouthy. So I'm very talkative. So a lot of my teachers thought it might be a good idea too.
What was it like receiving your education at Brock University and Niagara College?
Well, Niagara College was really the formal education, certainly in broadcasting. And Brock University I didn't actually graduate from Brock. I attended. And I took political science courses and I took English lit courses there. And one is very practically focused. So a lot of the hands-on, flipping the switch, editing, copy, writing and announcing and that sort of thing. And at Brock University, I wanted to learn more about political science. And I also wanted to learn, actually, the English lit course had a lot of books I'd always wanted to read. And so I knew it would force me to actually go ahead and read them. So a lot of Brock was really more about interest. And my education at Niagara College was more about having a career.
How has your role at 900 CHML changed over the years?
Well, when I was first hired at CHML, I was doing a lot of reporting. So I covered municipal politics, some crime, whatever the story of the day would be. But that also evolved into doing some traffic reporting and news announcing, especially on the weekends, at least to start. And then eventually I met one of the announcers here. His name is Bob Rutina, and we kind of hit it off. He thought maybe I would have what it takes to be a co-host to him and keep up with him, although nobody keeps up with Bob. And then eventually we went to the morning show. And then Bob decided to evolve his career into politics and leave broadcasting. So I went back into the newsroom as an announcer and reporter. And then we went into the all news format. So we were doing that for almost 10 years, I think. And then that evolved back into doing newscasts.
How do you think local news impacts Hamilton and the greater Hamilton area?
It's absolutely essential. Without local news, people here in Hamilton wouldn't know about things like the cover-up of friction report for the Red Hill Valley Parkway. That led to a judicial inquiry and uncovered a lot of things that were very questionable at the very least. So in finding and keeping to account anybody who holds power at the local level, it's absolutely crucial. Just this last week, we had a major fire at the YMCA, the men's residence downtown. We've had a series of shootings overnight. On Wednesday, there were 3 of them. 2 of them now have been linked. I mean, these are crucial pieces of information. And if you don't have local journalism going on, people aren't going to know what's happened. They'll be wondering what's going on around their own corner. And it's up to local journalists to answer those questions.
What advice would you have for aspiring broadcasters?
Aspiring broadcasters to go ahead. I know that the landscape is changing and there's a lot of flux going on, a lot of uncertainty. But one thing that hasn't changed in broadcasting is the connection to your listeners, the connection to your own community. And whatever form that transmission might take, because currently we're in what's called terrestrial radio. So we broadcast through a transmitter and it winds up in people's homes. If that then completely evolves into the digital format, that connection will never change. That need to be connected to another person, the need to be connected to your community, that won't change. It's just the form in which it's delivered.
I do think that things are evolving more to podcasts. You're seeing more and more people move to the podcasting side because it does reach more listeners. I think it's important to still have the traditional radio, but if you can have entertainment and news and these other things through podcasting as well, I think it's definitely an advantage to radio, and it'll help radio going forward.
Well, we call this a podcast because of the hardware and the format in how it's delivered. But it's an interview. It's about the connection between two people, asking questions, answering them, and that kind of connection. That will never change. We need to have that as human beings. And I think just recently with COVID and lockdown, I think people really understood what it's like to be isolated. And so that sense of connection, I think, is even more important.
Did you find that your job changed over COVID and shifted and with more of a focus on the pandemic during that time?
Well, we were focused on not just the pandemic and trying to understand what this virus was, how different it was from any other virus that's been out there, but also on the local level. Like if you needed resources here in Hamilton, if you needed medical attention, how strained were the resources here in this city for you to be able to get the kind of medical attention that you might need? That wound up being a lot of the focus of what we were trying to inform people of, so that you would know what's going on here in Hamilton. There were so many other problems that were going on, protests, whatever, that largely was outside of here. But we wanted to make sure that the people who lived here knew about what was going on here, what was available to them here, how strained the resources might be, what the new rules and regulations were, breaking into a regular scheduled program to tell people that we were going into lockdown. That was all crucial information. My job specifically really didn't change. Paul and I were, Paul Tipple, who is the other senior news anchor, we were in at the station every single day throughout COVID. That never changed. And that was because we needed to be able to coordinate everything that we were doing. So, again, that sense of connection, that dedication, it was probably one of the most important periods of my career, certainly, because delivering that information was vital to people. And that really is what this job is all about. And we have to continually bring those things up, whatever the backlash might be from some people who are just sick and tired of hearing about anything to do with COVID or medications or anything, but it's still vital and important information. And we have to go forward and make sure that that's on the air in an unbiased and as informed with, information from experts as we can be for our listeners. There are people who have called the radio station, not happy that there are times when we're still talking about COVID, but we're talking about it because it's important. And you can't be shut down by somebody just because they don't want to hear about it anymore. You've got the choice not to listen to a newscast if that's what you choose. But I think you're doing it at a detriment to yourself and your loved ones.
Is it hard for you as a newscaster sometimes to be as unbiased as possible?
Maybe at first in your career, because you do have your own personal opinions, but it is the job to tell the truth. And sometimes that truth may not agree with your own personal philosophy. And that doesn't matter because you've got to get accurate information out there. There may be certain politicians that you disagree with, but it's my job to quote them accurately and put that information out there so that the listener or people in the community can make their own informed decisions. And how you feel about it is how you're going to feel about it. But I'm going to do my best to tell you the truth about whatever situation it is, whatever news story it is, so that you can make the decision for yourself.
Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Oh, real pleasure.